Johnson & Johnson is offering $5.5 billion to settle remaining talc cancer lawsuits, according to Fast Company, Reuters, Al Jazeera, and The Guardian. The important fact is not only the dollar figure. It is whether courts, claimants, and the company accept a structure that can close years of litigation over ovarian cancer and mesothelioma claims. Reuters frames the offer as a possible end to a decade of legal exposure, while the other reports keep the focus on people who say talc products harmed them and on investors watching J&J's liability. The practical stakes are compensation timing, bankruptcy court strategy, and whether holdout plaintiffs continue separate cases. Viewers should watch for a judge's approval order, a claimant vote, objections from plaintiff groups, or a company securities filing that changes the reserve. If those records confirm participation levels and payment terms, the settlement becomes more concrete. If objections survive, the headline remains an offer rather than closure. The next court document is the checkpoint. The extra detail to track is how many claimants opt in, how fast payments start, and whether the settlement vehicle protects future cancer claims. A bankruptcy or securities filing with those numbers would turn a broad offer into an enforceable timetable for families, courts, insurers, pharmacies, and shareholders watching product liability risk. Donald Trump is asking the Supreme Court to overturn the $83.3 million Carroll Defamation Award, with Reuters, The New York Times, NBC News, and CNBC all describing the petition. The case matters because it tests whether the justices will revisit a civil verdict tied to statements made after Carroll's sexual abuse and defamation claims. Reuters identifies the filing route, while the other reports emphasize the size of the award and the former president's attempt to erase or reduce it. The immediate consequence is legal, not campaign theater. Carroll's judgment, Trump's appeal strategy, and the court's docket all turn on whether enough justices agree to hear the case. Viewers should watch for a response brief, a conference date, a certiorari order, or a denial. A denial would leave lower court results in place, while a grant would put immunity, damages, and defamation boundaries back before the justices. The next official Supreme Court docket entry is the record that moves the story. Also watch whether Carroll's lawyers ask the court to treat the petition as routine error correction or as an attempt to reopen facts already tested by a jury. That distinction will shape the justices' appetite for review and tell viewers whether the appeal is about constitutional doctrine, damages math, or relitigating trial findings. The Senate has confirmed Jay Clayton as the new Director of National Intelligence, replacing Bill Pulte, according to Courthouse News, CNBC, NBC News, and The Guardian. Clayton is best known as a former Securities and Exchange Commission chair, so the confirmation raises practical questions about how he will manage intelligence agencies rather than markets or enforcement offices. CNBC and NBC focus on the Senate vote and the leadership handoff, while Courthouse News frames the post as the top United States spy job. The stakes are chain of command, congressional oversight, and whether the new director changes priorities on threats, budgets, or information sharing. Viewers should watch for the oath, the first public guidance to agencies, Senate Intelligence Committee follow-up, and any written confirmation of deputies or transition timing. If lawmakers publish questions for the record, those answers will show how Clayton defines the job. The personnel announcement is real, but the operating agenda is still pending. The next useful evidence is an official D&I statement or oversight hearing notice. A second checkpoint is whether intelligence leaders receive new guidance on election security, cyber threats, classified briefings, budget choices, or Russia and China analysis. Those documents would show whether the confirmation changes daily operations or simply fills the office, especially for agency budgets, briefing access, and congressional confidence. Apple briefly reached a $5 trillion market value for the first time, with CNBC, Bloomberg Business Post, and the Journal Record all tracking the milestone. The number matters because it shows how investors are pricing Apple against the rest of the technology sector, especially as artificial intelligence expectations and iPhone demand shape market confidence. CNBC reports the threshold. Bloomberg places Apple among the small group of companies near that scale, and the other business outlets show how widely the market cap signal was watched. The public consequence is not a product launch by itself. It is whether the valuation survives earnings, guidance, regulatory pressure, and competition from NVIDIA and other AI leaders. Viewers should watch the next market close, quarterly results, services revenue, China sales commentary, and analyst revisions. If the market cap holds after official financial numbers, the milestone has stronger meaning. If it fades with trading, it remains an intraday signal. The next SEC filing or earnings call is the checkpoint. The concrete question for households and investors is whether Apple's cash flow, buybacks, device cycle, App Store regulation, China demand, and AI roadmap justify the premium. Guidance on features, margins, services growth, device upgrades, and antitrust risk will decide whether 5 trillion is a durable floor or ceiling for investors this quarter and beyond. Benjamin Netanyahu is set to meet Donald Trump for the first time since the Iran war, according to Jewish telegraphic agency, AP News, PBS, and The Washington Post. The meeting matters because it brings together Israel's wartime calculations, United States political support, and the unresolved regional consequences of strikes involving Iran. AP and PBS describe the encounter, while Jewish telegraphic agency adds Israeli political reaction and The Washington Post gives broader diplomatic context. The stakes are security commitments, diplomacy with Iran, Gaza policy, and whether public praise becomes written policy or military coordination. Viewers should watch for a joint statement, White House readout, Israeli cabinet response, or any text on aid, sanctions, or ceasefire conditions. If the readout names concrete commitments, the meeting changes policy. If it stays symbolic, the practical effect is limited. The next official statement from either government is the record to judge. Also watch whether regional governments or hostage negotiators respond, because outside reaction can reveal which promises are workable. The clearest sign of substance would be a dated security, sanctions, humanitarian hostage, or military coordination step that an agency can implement, fund, brief to allies, and defend publicly after the meeting ends. With named deadlines, responsible offices, measurable obligations, follow-up diplomacy, visible regional buy-in, and public accountability after cameras leave today. 86 senators voted to move forward with the Graham-Russia sanctions bill, according to Axios, Politico, The New York Times, and The Hill. The size of the procedural vote matters because it suggests broad pressure for tougher penalties tied to Russia, but it does not yet mean final passage or implementation. Axios and Politico focus on the vote count and Lindsey Graham's role, while The New York Times and The Hill place the measure inside Senate negotiations over Ukraine, Russia, and executive branch authority. The practical stakes are energy markets, secondary sanctions, presidential discretion, and whether allies or targeted companies get clear compliance rules. Viewers should watch for amended bill text, a final passage vote, White House comments, and Treasury guidance. If the bill advances with specific authorities intact, businesses can prepare for real restrictions. If negotiations dilute it, the vote mainly shows leverage. The next printed amendment or Senate roll call is the checkpoint. A useful follow-up will name which countries, banks, energy firms, insurers, traders, or shipping networks face penalties and how quickly enforcement begins. Without that language, the vote is pressure. With it, the bill becomes an operational sanctions map for governments, companies, banks, insurers, commodity traders, shipping firms, lawyers, compliance teams, foreign ministries, energy buyers, regulators, auditors, executives, ministers, and agencies. A powerful earthquake struck southern Japan, with The Washington Post, CBS News, NBC News, and the Los Angeles Times reporting injuries, damaged buildings, evacuations, and missing person concerns. The key facts for the public are location, magnitude, aftershock risk, and whether rescue crews can reach damaged areas quickly. CBS and NBC emphasize injuries and evacuations, while The Washington Post and Los Angeles Times describe the broader emergency picture. The consequence is humanitarian and infrastructure-focused. Roads, hospitals, shelters, power, and coastal warnings determine how dangerous the next day becomes. Viewers should watch Japan Meteorological Agency bulletins, local government casualty updates, evacuation orders, transport closures, and any tsunami or aftershock advisories. If officials revise the missing person count or name blocked communities, the story changes quickly. If lifelines reopen and warnings ease, the risk narrows. The next official emergency management update, not another summary headline, is the checkpoint. The most practical signs will be shelter counts, restored rail or highway service, hospital capacity, bridge inspections, port status, water service, and school closures. Those details tell families whether the disaster is stabilizing or spreading into a longer recovery, and they give viewers concrete signals beyond early casualty and damage estimates from reporters still waiting for official field checks, aftershocks, rescue access, utility repairs, shelter operations, updated maps, and damage surveys statewide today.